Yeah.
Welcome back. Again, we're talking about the progression of the disease of addiction. But one of the things that we know about this disease is that it always progresses, even if the person is abstaining from the drugs and alcohol all the time. So a lot of times in the rehab I work in, we'll see people that have stopped because they came in rehab, and they go back out and start using again, and within a short period of time, they're back to the same amount that they left off with, even if they haven't used in a year. It also progresses at different rates for different people. So I always tell people, don't compare your use, your progression, your disease to anybody else. If someone's using crack cocaine, they may progress in 2 weeks or less. If someone's using alcohol, it may not progress for 20 or 30 years. Are they both addicts? Of course. And the way I'm going to describe it tonight, I'm going to use it on a continuum. Use, or I will say green flags, is when it's not a problem in someone's life. What are some examples that you could think of for use, where it's not a problem in someone using? Social drinking, such as going out to dinner, having a couple glasses of wine, a couple beers. It's not a problem. It doesn't cause any problems in your life. So I'll rate that one first. Anybody else think of any other examples of use in your life or your loved one's life where it didn't cause any problems? And let me break it down a little bit more. In this category, people are using because they experiment, like every teenager. They're using it for fun. They're using, here's a key word, occasionally. Now, if your loved one's an addict, there's no such thing as occasional. It's every day, every time, every chance they get, every time they have some money or any money they can steal. That's not this category. This is used when someone first starts using, before it progresses. Someone has beer with their pizza. My wife and I always have this discussion because she is in recovery, and she gave me permission to say that. I'm not in recovery. So one year we had a Super Bowl, we watched the Super Bowl, and I went out and bought some Super Bowl beers to watch the Super Bowl. A year later, when the next Super Bowl came, I still had 9 of the 12 beers left. And she couldn't understand that. And, she thought it was crazy. I said, but it's only for a Super Bowl. I can't use them. So it's not a problem if someone goes out and has a drink or 2 or 3. They don't get in trouble. They don't get arrested. They don't have family problems. They're still in this category of use. And I like to say it's green flags. Not a problem. Go. It's okay. It hasn't caused problems yet. That doesn't mean it's not going to progress. In this category, you learn about the mood swings. Oh, let me read my writing. Oh, it's bouncing. Teenagers all begin to use, for what reason? Or one of 2 reasons. Peer pressure. Absolutely. And when you're 13, 14, 15 years old, there's a lot of pressure. Most people, it doesn't become a problem. But they learn in this phase, when they first start using, about the mood swings. Hey, this takes away this problem. It makes me not feel sad. It makes me not feel lonely. It makes me not feel depressed. It makes me not feel anxious. They learned about it. And that's up here in their brain. Let me give you some quick numbers. And I just looked these up on the internet today. 71% of adults have consumed alcohol in the last year. This is Americans. 127 million Americans over age 12 have used an illegal substance. 41 million have used an illegal substance in the last year. You can see what an epidemic this is becoming. And with the progression of this disease, it's going to get worse and worse. But most of those numbers that I just gave you, which are astronomical numbers when you think about it, most of those will not become addicted. If someone gets drunk once in a while, is that a problem? Don't answer.
Define once.
Yes.
Once in a while.
Define once.
Once every couple months. I heard a yes somewhere. Who said yes? Why is that a problem? Wait, are you the one getting drunk or something?
Isn't it just the fact of getting drunk is the problem? Like,
No.
No?
Has it caused any problems emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, financially, or legally?
Consequences, right? There's no consequences.
There's no consequences.
Yeah, but the people that have to deal with the drunk, even if it's only, every 6 months, that's still a lot of drama because depends. Not everyone who gets drunk is a nice, friendly drunk. Some of them are just raging.
So now it has caused family problems.
Yes.
So now you'll see the next category will be a yellow flag. It started to cause problems. But if someone just gets drunk once in a while, they can still be in this category. If someone smokes weed once in a while, they can still be in this category of use. It has not caused problems unless it starts causing family problems or financial, legal, mental, whatever else. So just because they have used maybe even more than they're supposed to, they can still be in a category of use. No one in this category, or very seldom someone in this category, drink in the morning or drug in the morning. Why?
Unless you're on vacation.
If you're on a cruise, right. Right, you would never think about it unless there was like a special event, or you're on a cruise, or you're on vacation, or all you can drink, and if you're not an addict.
And I did hear brunch.
And brunch, right,
Somebody said
mimosas.
Mimosas.
The addicts, the alcoholics, need some in the morning just to function, to feel normal again. That's not this category. Too many papers here. Why don't they drink in the morning if it's not an alcoholic or an addict in this category? He set me up. What happened?
That was a test to see
Got
if
it.
you were drunk or not.
I'm sorry?
That was a test to see if you were drunk or not.
I don't know what happened. Why doesn't the non-alcoholic and non-addict drink or drug in the
They're
morning?
not using it to cope.
They don't
They're,
have
they're not
physical-
dependent on it.
They're not dependent upon it. Yes, ma'am?
They don't have a physical dependence.
They don't have a physical dependence, so they're not going through physical withdrawal. Someone else?
Probably going to work.
Not a compulsion.
Not a compulsion or an obsession.
It would kind of be irresponsible.
Okay, so they conform to social norms.
You have to go to work or something, you wouldn't just choose not to do that.
And most people would say this too. They don't need to.
Correct.
Alcoholics and addicts need to. Partly because of whoever said it, physical dependence or psychological dependence. Okay, let's go to the next category. Maybe I'll knock this down and I can flip the page. Abuse. They start progressing. And that's why I put yellow flags. These are things that might be yellow flags. It has caused at least one problem in their life. Might be more, but at least one. You can see the progression. It starts to cause problems. Whether it's family discord, whether they start losing their money, spending more and more of the money on their substance, maybe an arrest for a DWI the first time. What's that?
Using their job, using their license.
It might not get to that point yet, but it might start causing those problems. You'll see the next category. You think what else could it cause?
Mood swings.
Yes, but the difference is they start seeking mood swings. Whereas before they just learned about it and they were aware of it. Now they start seeking these mood swings. Okay, I had a bad day, my boss was a jerk today, my wife mistreated me, therefore I need to do whatever substance. They start seeking it. You start to see some behavior changes. Maybe they start telling little lies. Maybe they start coming in late. Maybe you don't quite believe their stories. Maybe they start saying, I only had 2 drinks when you know they had 5. Maybe when they tell you, I didn't smoke weed, and you can smell it on them. You'll start noticing those things. I mentioned they might have got arrested, DWI, maybe a possession charge. But a person that truly doesn't have a problem with alcohol and drugs, and they get arrested at first time for a DWI, what do?
Stop.
They stop. Because it scared the hell out of them. They realize they can't progress. They realize they can't go on like this, and they can't risk the consequences. So they stop. They become a teetotaler. And they don't use. And maybe not for a long time, maybe not ever. They maintain control. Now, some people would argue, well,
Is that the progression of the user?
where's my breathalyzer? Some people would say that, oh, they got arrested, therefore they're an addict. That's not true. If you look in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, version 5, it gives you all the criteria. Nowhere does it say if you have one arrest that you're an addict or alcoholic. So you, that board's crooked now. So you still maintain control in the abuse category. Although, if you had an arrest, that would be at least a yellow flag going up. If you had family arguments all the time, a yellow flag. If they got suspended from work, a yellow flag. You can see they start adding up over time. If they got out, here's one I make sure I mention, a restraining order because of their use. I do a part-time job too, and the other night in my group, a guy had a restraining order, and he was blaming the ex-girlfriend because all he did was tip the table over while drunk. And I said, well, what does the restraining order say? He goes, well, I slammed the table against the wall. I said, that's not tipping. But he believed that. They drink or drug more than occasionally.
Would this be the weekend binger?
It could be. Because they're still maintaining control. But, you know, if I was doing an assessment in my program I work for, I would ask them, well, what happens when you drink? Do you get arrested every weekend? Do you get a restraining order every weekend? Do you get thrown out every weekend? Do you get in fights? Do you whatever? So the more of those yellow flags, I would start being concerned, because the next category is the red flags. They use the chemicals more or less at appropriate times and places. So they may just drink at the barbecue, they may just drink at family functions, they may drink or drug at special events, or their birthday, maybe, what's a good time of year when people drink and drug? St. Patrick's Day, you can't forget that one. New Year's Eve, most of my clients say, you have to drink on New Year's Eve. Like, no you don't. And they're shocked by that. So they're still drinking on occasion, and they maintain control. I said they seek the mood swings. They develop their own rules, and they adhere to them. Like, I'm only going to drink Friday and Saturday night. And they only drink Friday and Saturday night. What does that exhibit? Give you a hint. They're still maintaining control. If they say, I'm only going to drink at the football games when I watch them Sundays, and they only drink Sundays, they have these self-imposed rules that they're able to maintain. They're still exhibiting self-control. Most social users, they may stay in use, or they may progress to this category. It's still not a problem. If I can read my own notes up here, all right. Most of the time when they're in this category, it's not causing problems in their life, or not causing a lot of problems, or not causing major problems. And if it does cause a problem, they stop or cut way back. And unfortunately, between this category and the next category, which is dependence or addiction, there's a gray area. I wish there was a defined line that says, okay, if you do A, B, C, D, and E, F, now you're an addict. There's not. There's a big gray area in between. Now if I get this board to work again. Lindsay gives me these trick boards. Dependence, or addiction. This is where the red flags start going up. This is where the addicts progress to. Now again, if it's crack cocaine, it may be a week or two. If it's alcohol, maybe 20, 30, or 40 years before they get to this phase. But they will always progress if they're an addict. I was talking to one of my coworkers today who's in recovery, and I was telling him about my 3 categories of use, abuse, and dependence. I said, some people go through use and abuse slowly. He goes, I just use those as speed bumps. He goes, it slowed me down a little bit. He goes, but I got here real quick. And I said, yeah, I'm going to use that tonight.
Yeah.
In this category, multiple problems in their life. And again, legal, emotional, mental, physical, spiritual, financial. What categories are that?
Familiar.
Social.
I said family.
Social.
Social. Occupational. Thank you. So I forgot that one. And you'll start seeing problems as it progresses in all of those areas. In the early stages of the dependence phase, you might only see a couple problems in a couple categories. But as time progresses, as they progress in their addiction, you're going to see problems in every area of their life. Now, in the last category of abuse I talked about, they seek the mood swings sometimes. In this category, they're dependent upon it for their mood swings. One of the things, whenever I do a group at work, I always tell my clients, especially when I'm talking about feelings, because that really confuses people when we talk about feelings. I said, all addicts, all alcoholics use, in part, not to think and not to feel. And they think I'm like a genius when I say that. I say, that's just, anybody who's worked in this field, you realize that. Because they're always using it as an escape, not to deal with problems, thoughts, and feelings. And we have, 2-hour groups on this sometimes, and they walk out of there like, how profound that is. And one of the things I always joke about in my groups, I say, if you went to high school, you learned algebra and geometry and history and world civilization and Western civilization, all that stuff that I haven't used yet, unless I played Jeopardy. But who taught us how to deal with our feelings? If you don't come from a healthy family, you never learn how to cope with your feelings. So when you discover drugs or alcohol, you realize, wow, this takes all those problems away. Now again, going way back to where I was 15 minutes ago, in use, it was fun. It was occasional use. It was experimental, maybe peer pressure. And then it progressed a little bit more. You started seeking that relief a little bit. Here, in this category, you're dependent upon that for that relief. You don't know how to cope any other way. But here's one of the problems. It creates a vicious cycle because a lot of times when I talk to my clients, they're using and they have to use more and more to cover up their feelings. Well, to buy more and more drugs and more alcohol, they need more and more money. And to get more money, they often commit illegal acts. I know that's a shock. And when they commit these illegal acts, they feel more guilt, more shame, more embarrassment, especially when they're confronted or they got arrested. Now they need more drugs to cover up more feelings that they have never learned how to cope with. In this category, once they cross that invisible gray area between abuse and dependence, there's no going back. I'm trying to think of what you're saying. Once you're a pickle, you can't go back to being a cucumber. That's what my wife always says. So I'm going to steal that from her tonight. Once you're a pickle, you can't go back to being a cucumber. Once you're an addict or an alcoholic, you can't go back to social use. And that's why AA and most rehabs teach no such thing as one. Still got 2 hours, right? I got a ways to go. Some years ago, one of my ex-wives, I have a couple of them, one of my ex-wives was clearly, and they're exes for a reason, one of them was absolutely dependent upon prescription medication. benzodiazepines, Klonopin, Xanax, all those things. And I knew she was abusing. I was a trained counselor with advanced degrees and 20 years experience. I knew she was abusing them. And one time I even wrote her doctor, stop prescribing these things. She's abusing the hell out of them. She takes 5 or 10 at a time. Like, it's ridiculous. And then one time I remember she filled her prescription bottle, and we got into an argument. And she left for about 2 or 3 hours and came back home, and I noticed she was acting differently and seemed different. And I asked her to see her prescription bottle. And she said, no, 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 no. I said, did you abuse them again? And of course she lied, imagine that, and said, no, 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 no. And after about a 15-minute debate, arguing about that, she finally gave me her prescription bottle. And it was empty. She took them all that night purposely. Now, I was a trained counselor with, I don't know, at that time, maybe 17 years experience. I know better than anybody. And I hesitated to call an ambulance or the police or anybody else. And eventually I got her to concede to go to the hospital. And they put a bunch of charcoal in her belly and up the nose and pumped her stomach and put her in a psych ward for a suicide attempt. Because she was trying to cope with her feelings that she didn't know how to deal with. She was looking to escape that night, completely and totally. And I'm thankful that somewhere deep down inside, I had the courage to say, you have to go to hospital, I'm calling 911. And to this day, to be honest, I'm not sure I would have called her. I was so scared. And when she was in the psych ward, my biggest fear, I lied to everybody. Imagine that. I lied to people why she was there. I said she had a cardiac issue. And I thought at the time I was protecting her, but I was more worried what people were going to think of me. If I have a client in my office and I ask him, has alcohol or drugs ever caused problems in your life? What do they 90% of the time say? No. So I don't ask that question. I ask questions like this. And has anybody ever heard of the CAGE screening tool? CAGE? Okay, I'll tell you about it. It's a quick screening tool that we use to screen somebody if they have a problem and whether or not we need to do a full assessment. C stands for, has anybody ever said to you, you need to cut down your use? Because if you're not in this category, 90% of the time people are not saying that to you. A, have you ever felt annoyed by someone's comment about your drinking or drugging? Because if you're not an addict or alcoholic, people are probably not making comments about it. G, have you ever felt guilty about your use? And of course, my clients always answer yes to all these questions. But if I ask them, has alcohol, drugs ever caused problems in life? They all say no. They don't believe it did. And E is eye-opener. Have you ever needed a drug or alcohol for an eye-opener? To get going in the morning, to wake up, to feel normal. Because if you're not in this category, you don't do that. So in this category, we absolutely see loss of control. They will lose control over how much and how often they use. Now remember the other two categories, use and abuse, yellow flags and green flags, they still maintain control. In this category, they don't maintain control. And I laugh sometimes when I'm doing a group at work, some clients will come in and say, I could drink a 30-pack of beer, and they're bragging about it. I'm like, that's not normal. Or they, what's the handle, I think they call it. It's a 1.75 liters. Most people that would kill, and they come in bragging how I could drink that every day. That's not normal. They lost control. They also have another key word, tolerance. The average person maybe can handle 3, 4, 5 drinks without being drunk. But these clients are talking about handling a 30-pack of beer or a handle of vodka or rum. That tells me right away, I got a red flag. They've got tolerance That's not normal. I'm running out of room here. We will also see in this category withdrawal symptoms. And depending on the drug, it will be either psychological or physical. And that's a lot of times why they need the drug in the morning to feel normal again and to prevent the withdrawal symptoms in the morning. Where was I at? Going back to control. One of the great questions or great sayings I've come up with over the years that I've heard, I don't know where, but it says this: if you have to control, you're out of control. Because if it's not a problem, you don't need to make efforts to control it. So you'll see a lot of efforts in this category. So I'll never ask someone, do you control your use? I'll ask them a roundabout way, like, what efforts have you made to control your use? What efforts have you made to cut down your use? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they'll give me a whole list of reasons, not realizing they'll give me a red flag. That's a problem. They made lots of efforts to cut down. Or they'll say, oh yeah, I cut down, 3 weeks ago Friday, I only had 10 beers instead of my normal 15. And I say, what happened the next day? Oh, I had 15. That's not control. And again, Nancy Reagan was fond of saying, just say no. Yeah, in use and abuse, maybe. In this category, they cannot. They may even have the desire to cut down. That's one of the questions I would ask someone doing an assessment. Do you have a desire to cut down? And I would say, why? And they would often say, well, it's caused problems at home, or caused problems at work, caused problems at school, or I got a lower grade, something like that. So they can start giving me a whole list of things. So I'm looking for more and more areas where they lose control. They may experience, if they're an alcoholic, blackouts in this category. And when I do a group or a lecture at work, I ask this question: how many blackouts does the average person, non-alcoholic, have in their lifetime? 0. And of course, when I'm doing a group at work, they just say, oh, 5, 10, 20. And there's a competition. Who had the most? Not the least. And it's sad and it's sick. The average person has 0 blackouts in their life. If someone tells me they had a blackout, another red flag for me. I know it's progressing. Again, they use in this category to feel normal. They don't know how to cope. They don't know how to deal with the feelings. They don't know how to deal with the thoughts. So they have to use to feel normal. I mentioned withdrawal, right? They will take it in larger and larger amounts over time. Now, someone may progress from use to abuse and go from 2 beers to 5 beers. But they'll stop there. When they progress to this stage, they take off like a rocket, as my friend called it today, speed bumps. They go to 20, 30 beers, sometimes 40, and I've heard 50 beers a day. They spend a lot more time seeking their drug of choice. A person that doesn't have a problem spends very little time thinking about it. Maybe I'll have a beer when I go out to dinner tonight. That's it. Maybe they don't think about that till they get to the restaurant. But the alcoholic, the addict that's dependent or an addiction, thinks about it all the time. What am I going to do tonight? Where am I going to get the money to use? What am I going to do tomorrow? Constantly thinking about it and how they're going to get their drug of choice. They fail to fulfill life's roles such as husband, mother, father, brother, sister, child, work, school. More and more of these categories they start failing at. Now, it may start out as family discord at first, but eventually children don't want to talk to them. Eventually the boss doesn't want to talk to them. Eventually, they don't want to come to the family events. You'll start seeing more and more of those family problems. Again, red flags. They'll start missing their children's events. I've heard this a million times. Clients in my rehab, they'll talk about the guilt they feel because they went out to use their drugs as opposed to going to their son or daughter's school event, or back to school night, or their recital, or their dance, or their whatever. And I always say, well, why did you do that? And they said, I couldn't help it. I had to get my drugs. And that, gives me another story I sometimes tell, that there's a lot of people in the world that thinks, this is all a choice whether you become an addict or not. It's a choice if you use. No one makes a choice to become an addict. And I always talk about it to my clients this way. The American dream. You're living in Toms River, New Jersey, a $300,000 home. You have the white picket fence, the 4-bedroom house with walk-in closets, and the Volvo and the minivan in the driveway, and the 2.3 kids and 3 bathrooms. The American dream. No one wakes up one day and says, hey, how can I ruin all this? I've got an idea. I'll become an addict or an alcoholic. That will wipe all that out. No one's making that choice. But the progression over time, which is very, very insidious in all their areas of their life, it does wipe all that out. And they can't see it until they crash or hit bottom sometimes. What stops them from seeing it? Mrs. Desch, is it?
Denial.
Denial. I've trained her well. Denial. And I always tell people, denial is not the same as lying. People get that confused. Because a lot of times, families will come in, well, he's lying about, problems. No, he truly believes what he or she is saying. They say, I don't have a problem. I still got control. I can still handle this. It's not causing problems in my life. They truly believe that. They're not lying. But in a state of denial, which is part of this, that would be another red flag for me. How much denial they have, in spite of all the facts in front of them. Still got time, Lindsay? Okay. They're a lot more aware of drinking and drugging than the average person would be. My wife and I joke all the time. We'll go out to dinner, and she'll say, did you see that guy? I'm like, what guy? He goes, the guy that left a half a beer. I'm like, who? Like, or a half a glass of wine, 18 tables over on the other side of the room with the music playing. I'm like, I said, if they left a half a chicken parm, I'd be worried. But I don't notice people leaving drinks. She notices it all the time. Oh, here's a shocker for you. They lie. They lie about how much they're using, how often they're using, where they're going, when they're going to be home. They lie about everything. And you heard me say in the category of abuse, they start to lie. You'll see the little lies. And you may not pay much of attention, but there's a yellow flag for you. As it progresses, you're going to see more and more lies, and the stories will be very elaborate. I'm still shocked in my job because we have cameras all over the place now, because we have to. And we'll see someone do something wrong. 3 staff members will witness it. We'll have it on video camera. We'll confront the client about it. They say, that's not me. But it is you. It's all your same clothes. We saw you do it. That's not me. They'll lie despite the facts. And sometimes they'll convince you. They blame others why they use. Well, she ticked me off. My boss was a jerk today, etc., etc. The police were blankety blank blanks blank blanks when they arrested me. In this category, they need their drug or alcohol. They may attempt geographic cures, moving. And we always say that no matter where you go, there you will be. No such thing as a geographic cure. I have clients move all over the country. I have some move out of the country. I even have a family friend that was an English-speaking teacher in Japan, and he's in recovery now. And he says, I'm the only person I know that got kicked out of a country for drinking. Because he got drunk all the time, caused so many problems in Japan, they banned him from going back to Japan. We will also see in this category, the consequences will start getting worse. You won't see one arrest, you'll see multiple arrests. A lot of times when I get an assessment from somebody at work, I'll see 10, 20 arrests, maybe 10 or 20 years in prison. If you see the progression, that's a clear sign that they have this disease of addiction. Because if they don't, you won't see the progression. You won't see them progressing from abuse to dependence. So if you see that progression, if you see a lot of these red flags showing up more and more, they're clearly having this disease of addiction. The problem will not get better by themselves. If they're in use and abuse, they still maintain control, so they may be able to stop themselves. They can stop themselves. In this category, they cannot without some type of outside help. That's why you have organizations like Hope Sheds Light or Discovery Institute or 900 other rehabs out there that can intervene and help someone deal with life, learn how to cope with life. I've had clients come into treatment with 18, 19, 20 rehabs under their belt, and they still say, I don't have a problem. And I say, well, what about the 18 arrests you have? Or how your family threw you out? Or how your family doesn't want you home anymore? You'll start seeing a host of problems. Emotional, mental, physical, spiritual, financial, and occupational, and there's probably other categories too. Where was I headed? I want to go back to loss of control. And again, I have permission to share this. My wife, my best partner in life, is in recovery. I mentioned that already. And a bunch of years ago when I met her, she had 7 years sober. And she had something happen in her life, and it knocked her off her feet. And I suspected that she started drinking again. My gut was churning. It was screaming to me, something's wrong. Something's not right. Up here, I kept saying, no, 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 no. I can't. She wouldn't do that. She wouldn't give up 7 years. I didn't want to believe that. But my gut kept saying, something's wrong. I confronted her. We got into arguments about it. She would say, no, 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 no. And because I'm not in recovery, I had a bottle of rum in one of my closets. And one day I decided just to mark it with one little dot. I figured if she's drinking, that's going to go down. And I forgot about it for a couple of days. And a couple of days later, oh, so let me go check that bottle. Not really thinking much about it, thinking everything's going to be okay. I'm overthinking this. It's not a problem. It can't be a problem. No way in hell. And I checked it, and it didn't go down. It went up.
Yeah, true story.
But I knew what that meant. Because I've heard 24 years of these stories at that time. I knew, and I confronted her at night, and she admitted it. And, probably some of my own denial kicked in. And I said, okay, get back on track. We had probably an argument or two over that, and hopefully she was back on track. And I didn't put a lot of stock into it. Probably didn't do enough on my part. And it was sometime later, right? Months later. I went out to lunch one day with my coworker. Now again, this disease always progresses. I should have remembered that. I didn't at that time. Because it was still progressing. She was hiding it. She was lying about it. I would go to work. I would work double shifts. I worked 3 extra nights a week. She had 16 hours, 18 hours a day all by herself. I was hopeful. And then one day I was out to lunch and I texted her and she didn't answer. And that was unusual because we have constant contact with text. And then I sent her another text, and another text, and another phone call. No answers, which I'm sure a lot of people experience this in the room. You get that uncomfortable knot in your stomach, that fear, that dread, that worry. And I kept calling, I kept texting for several hours. And I figured, hopefully she dropped the phone in the toilet bowl. That was my hope. Maybe she cut her finger, had to go to the hospital to get some stitches. Maybe she had a car accident. That was my worst case scenario. I wished it was one of those. And I finally said, I got to go home early. Something's wrong. She would have called or texted by now. And I drove from Marlboro to Bayville, and I think I held my breath the whole way. And when I rounded up my corner, I said, I can't wait to see her car in the driveway knowing she's okay. And her car wasn't there. And so I don't know what to do. Do I call the police? Do I call the hospitals? I don't know where to begin to look. Just sheer panic. Assuming she had to be at the hospital or had a car accident. And within about 20 minutes, luckily, by the grace of God, the phone rang. It was an unknown number from Tom's River. And I never answer unknown numbers. But something told me to answer that. And it was Susan. Hysterical, crying, not making a lot of sense, etc., etc. And I finally said, what happened? And she said this. I've been arrested. And I'm sure a lot of people experience when the disease progresses, that sinking feeling in your stomach. And I tried to get some thoughts out. I'm not sure what came out as to what did you get arrested for. I'm hoping, the registration was invalid or something like that. And she says, drunk driving and some other charge. It progressed. I put a little bit of a blind eye to it. I know better than anybody. But it was progressing. She was drinking all the time. And she spent some time in jail, and luckily at this point in time I got myself a little bit back together and I used intellect over emotions. The family had enough money to bail her out, and I said, no, leave her there. I cried myself to sleep every night, but I said, leave her there. She deserved it, and she admits that she deserved to be there. That was a tough decision. It was progressing for that year that she had relapsed. I didn't see it. She was an expert at hiding it, like all addicts are. I should have seen it. I knew better than anybody. Luckily, she August 2nd, she celebrates 4 years again, and is still doing great. And, but at one point in time, after she got out and got back on track and back in AA and all that stuff, all the stuff that she was supposed to be doing. One time we had a bunch of serious conversations, and she just literally sat there and cried to me. She goes, I tried to stop it. And here's a well-educated, middle class, raised in an upper middle class family, smart, strongest woman I know, and she just cried because she realized she couldn't control it. When it progresses to this phase, you lose all control. You cannot stop it. It controls you. I still have time to stop there. 7:55.
Keep going.
I have another hour.
Maybe 5 more minutes? Is that okay?
Here's a great term, and this is what I did. And I just learned this term recently from a coworker of mine who was a teller in a bank. They said willful blindness. I had willful blindness to what at the time she was my girlfriend, was doing. I knew she had relapsed. The rum in my bottle went up. I didn't have a distillery in my house. Didn't magically happen. I knew, but I had that willful blindness. I'm going to stop it there because the whole other category is another hour. Can I ask about questions? Any questions? Sir?
Yeah, I have a couple of friends that they got into like either alcohol abuse or drug abuse, and there was like a history of either bipolar or depression in the family, and a couple of their, parents or brothers thought that maybe, because they say when you deal with depression, a lot of times if you're not aware of it, you mask it with, alcohol or drugs. So in terms sometimes, like, if they go for help and they find that out and they end up either going on antidepressants or something, can that help them eventually maybe not go to the bottle or go to drugs if they, if they never knew they were diagnosed, say, with depression or bipolar or
Yes.
mental illness?
In my program, and probably most programs, we address co-occurring disorders. mental health and substance abuse. Years ago, they would separate them totally. And now we realize we can treat them simultaneously. And if you're not doing that, I would be concerned. Because one of the things I said earlier, all addicts, all alcoholics use, in part, not to think, not to feel. Depression is a major feeling. If they can't cope with that, they're self-medicating, why not address the underlying problem too, to eliminate that reason?
So then God willing, in some instances, there's a chance that if they get to the root of that and they, get the right medication, that they won't lean towards, hopefully, the drugs or the alcohol.
Well, it's going to take more than just medication. We've got to teach them coping skills, how to deal with the feelings, anger, whatever else, and also how to abstain. So in any treatment program, like I work for Discovery Institute in Marlboro, they're going to teach all these skills. And we have, a 30-day program, but we also have a 6-month program. So you have a lot more time to teach those things.
One friend of mine, I remember, she was from another country, and so she would drink a lot, and I would say to her, maybe there's other issues going on. And she was kidding, well, oh, you Americans are very weak, you always go into antidepressants. So I ran into her like about a year and a half later, and she looked great, her whole demeanor was really good. I said, wow, you look fantastic, you look happy. She goes, I started taking Zoloft like 9 months ago. I don't drink anymore. I feel like I said, so a part of me, it always stood out to me that, God bless for her. She found out, what was going on a little more, and she began to be healthier.
Just using that example of bipolar, it's the mood swings, the highs and the lows. Medication is, bringing it down here a little bit, not totally flat, but a little bit less. When they have the highs and the lows, that's what they're going to use over, because they can't deal with those highs and lows. If we can medicate them and bring them here, they're a lot better off and a better chance of staying sober.
Is there really hope? Because when you're dealing with an addict, especially one who doesn't want to stop, they just, they don't want to stop. Everything is falling apart, and they don't care. All they care about is their drug. And when I'm seeing that personally, I don't have a lot of hope for recovery. And
There's
I've
always
had-
hope.
And I've had, I had a feeling about my nephew, and I discovered him dead with a needle in his arm. I just got a phone call from my cousin, who's about my age, and her son just died from a drug. And I have so many friends whose kids have died, and I'm trying to be positive, but I'm telling you, it's like being hit with a bat. It's like very hard to have hope for recovery or the family ever to be a family again looking at this.
I've been at my job for 28 and a half years. And I started there in admissions, and now I'm the executive director. I've seen more funerals than I would like to count. But I've seen the other side of the coin, too. And a story I'll tell you is probably 24 years ago. And a guy came into treatment, I did his assessment. He had 18 prior treatments. He did every drug under the sun, including IV alcohol. I still remember his name. He shot up alcohol. That's not that uncommon. That's how desperate he got. And he came to us because he stole a piece of meat and got caught for shoplifting. And at the time, we were probably a 12 or 18-month program. Now, if I was a betting man, I would have bet against this guy in a heartbeat. 19's not going to work either. He was already 40-some years old. Hopeless, right? No. He completed 12 to 18 months in our program, or 1 year in our halfway house, and started running half marathons after that. And the last I heard of him about 4 years ago, he was still doing well running half marathons. Why did number 19 work? I don't know. He was ready. But it did work. And he's still doing well. In fact, he was working at West Point the last I heard of him. And he still stays in contact. Well, about 2 years, 3 years ago, I heard from him last. There was always hope. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to say that I thought your presentation was really great.
Thank you.
I actually tried to forward it to somebody that needed to hear what you were saying. But something that you said kind of struck me oddly, and it was the fact that knowingly that you've had somebody in your life that was struggling with an addiction and you still had the alcohol in the house. And I'm just wondering, was there ever a decision for you to just take everything out of the house, or were you kind of
foolish enough to believe that you're going to avoid alcohol. And I had asked her at the time, you want me to remove from the house? And she said no. And the analogy I often use, hopefully it works, is that if I was a diabetic and I know I can't eat sweets, that doesn't mean other people around me can't have that. They're going to avoid sugar and cakes and cookies and candy. Luckily, I don't have to avoid that. But I wouldn't impose that upon them to avoid all that, just for me. And we teach our clients in rehab, you know, our early recovery, avoid those things. Don't go to bars. Don't go to places where people are using. But if you go to a family event, expect there to be alcohol there.
And I had also established that I was working a very good program. I had become a certified drug and alcohol counselor in the meantime. I was the poster child for AA. So I had convinced everyone around me, but, you know.
Yes, she convinced everybody. Any other questions, folks?
The geological, like change of address, like I know a lot of people move to out of state or whatever, they say they can't complain, but they themselves have to be strong and stay, because no matter where you go, they can find it. So,
Yep.
like, everybody tells me they have to move out of the area, but I don't know where he would go, and I wish I could just send him to the land of, you know, I don't know, you know,
Well, every one of my clients will tell me that, you know, wherever they go, they'll find drugs in 5 minutes.
right.
It probably doesn't take them that long.
Yes.
You know what, I mean, I'm a nurse, I'm not a drug counselor or anything. I think that's a little outdated philosophy, because I think if you're truly an addict, I've always believed, like, if my son came home or my son went back to living in Florida, he was going to do drugs. And, I mean, it's got its merit, because, you know, it's easier to get if you know the whole area.
You're familiar, yeah,
But I think if you're really a hardcore drug addict and you move to another state, you're gonna find this.
Right.
You're gonna get.
Absolutely.
I mean, I don't know if you would know. That's what
I think everybody's different.
Yeah,
And everybody's
Yeah.
addiction is different, and everybody how they react.
I mean-
My son's in California. He's almost a year clean.
I mean, my
He doesn't
son
wanna
lives
come
in
back.
Australia.
He loves it. He's happy. He's working. He has got no desire to come back. And I think old habits die hard. I think it takes a long time for some people before they can come back. You know,
But you're right.
for him, it's good. It's really good.
Yeah, and the confusion I hear from clients all the time, it says, you know, geographic cures don't work, but AA says change people, places, and things. So it seems like a contradiction.
Yeah.
Well, geographic cure by itself is not going to change anything. It's changing here and here and avoiding it early on in recovery. Eventually you're going to be around it. There's no way you're going to avoid alcohol the rest of your life. It's got to be there. But if you change your thinking, change your coping skills, how you deal with feelings, and how you're not using that to escape, then it'll be okay to be around. Just like the diabetic that can be around cake and cookies without eating them. You got to take over, don't you? Chase it. I can feel it.
I really want to give a very special thank you to Roger and Susan, because even though Susan wasn't up here presenting, it was a dynamic team, and the courage that you have to share the story and the professional spin on it's just a beautiful thing. So I really want to extend a very personal thank you very, very much. So I just have a few announcements before we break out into our small groups. We have our Day of Hope coming up. We have flyers out in the vestibule area, as well as a volunteer sign up. We're looking for volunteers for our Day of Hope, so please sign up and I will email you. Also, we brought t-shirts today. I think you were asking for a t-shirt. So there's a box of our t-shirts from last year out in the hallway, all different sizes. So the box is out in the hallway. And does everyone have beads, and your surveys are all done? And once we have that, the beads, for those of you who may have come in late, our beautiful beads will determine what group you're in. And the beads are hung outside the doors. So we will lead the groups out into the hallways. And I want to thank everybody. And then when we're done, we're all going to come back in here for a few takeaways.
Absolutely.